Take your hands off me. Danielle Carter's voice was quiet enough that Officer Ryan Mercer almost mistook it for fear. Almost. Around them, Harbor International Terminal moved beneath cold white lights, rolling suitcases clicking across polished floors, radios murmuring behind security counters, and travelers streaming toward departure gates without realizing that something far more important than a boarding pass was about to be lost. Mercer's hand remained firmly around Danielle's arm as he guided her out of the fast-track lane, his expression carrying the confidence of a man who believed the uniform had already settled the argument. "You don't decide where you belong," he told her. Danielle didn't answer. She was 29, black, dressed in dark slacks and a simple charcoal jacket, with nothing about her appearance announcing authority. No visible badge, no federal windbreaker, no partner standing beside her. To Mercer, she looked like a young woman who had entered a restricted lane and refused to accept his command. To the people watching, she looked like someone in trouble. But Danielle wasn't watching them. Her eyes moved beyond Mercer's shoulder toward Gate 12, nearly 40 yards away, where a man in a gray coat had just checked his phone. Once, twice. Then he changed direction. Danielle's pulse sharpened. Not because Mercer was holding her, because the man was leaving. 6 months of surveillance, encrypted calls, financial records, and carefully protected identities were moving away with him. Mercer couldn't possibly know that. He couldn't know that Danielle Carter wasn't the name printed on the travel document inside her purse. He couldn't know that 3 cameras above the concourse were being monitored by federal agents in another part of the terminal. And he certainly couldn't know why Danielle had allowed this confrontation to continue when one credential could have ended it instantly. "Last chance," Mercer said. "Tell me why you were in fast track." Danielle looked directly at him. Calm. Still. Measuring every second. "Officer, you need to let me go." Mercer gave a short, dismissive laugh. "That's not how this works." Behind them, someone lifted a phone. Another traveler slowed down. A mother pulled her suitcase closer while watching from several feet away. Danielle could feel the familiar weight of assumptions settling over the scene before anyone knew the facts. Imagine standing there knowing you could prove everyone wrong with one movement, one badge, one sentence, and knowing that doing so might destroy something bigger than your own humiliation. Danielle had spent years learning how to remain composed when every instinct demanded action. Today, that discipline was being tested in the most public way possible. Her gaze returned to Gate 12. The gray coat was almost gone. Then her phone vibrated inside her jacket. Once. A coded signal. Mercer noticed. "Give me the phone." For the first time, something changed in Danielle's eyes. Not panic. Calculation. She looked toward the gate again and saw the man disappear behind a security partition. "You have no idea what you're interrupting," she said. Mercer smiled as though she had just confirmed every suspicion he carried. "I'm interrupting you." Danielle said nothing. Somewhere beyond the terminal walls, a surveillance team was watching the clock. Somewhere near Gate 12, their target was changing course. And Officer Ryan Mercer still believed he had simply removed a suspicious black woman from a restricted line. He had no idea that the woman standing in front of him was an undercover FBI agent, or that by pulling her away from that gate, he had just placed a 6-month federal operation on the edge of collapse. 47 minutes earlier, Danielle Carter had entered Harbor International Terminal looking exactly like someone nobody needed to remember. That was the point. The morning crowd flowed around her beneath rows of departure screens while luggage wheels tapped steadily across the polished floor and distant announcements blended with the low mechanical hum of the terminal. Danielle carried one small black bag and wore the same charcoal jacket she would later be standing in when Officer Ryan Mercer pulled her away from the fast-track lane. Nothing about her invited attention. No visible federal credentials. No tactical equipment. No partner walking beside her. Even the name attached to her travel documents belonged to the identity prepared for the operation. Danielle moved at an ordinary pace, but her eyes were working constantly. Camera above the information desk. Security officer near the elevators. Emergency exit beside Gate 10. 2 port employees talking beside a service corridor. Then Gate 12. That was where everything mattered. For 6 months, federal investigators had been quietly following evidence suggesting that confidential cargo inspection information was being passed outside official channels. Shipments that should have received additional scrutiny somehow moved through without delay. Records were altered. Inspection schedules appeared in the wrong hands. Every lead eventually pointed toward the same place, the port. But nobody knew exactly who inside the system was responsible, and moving too early could send every important suspect underground. Danielle's assignment that morning was deliberately narrow. Observe. Confirm the contact. Protect her cover. Do not intervene unless the operation required it. A man wearing a gray coat was expected to enter the terminal shortly before 9 o'clock. He would not speak to Danielle. He would not acknowledge her. If the intelligence was correct, he would approach the fast-track area, remain there briefly, and make contact with someone connected to the information leak. Danielle checked the ordinary silver watch on her wrist. 8:41. She continued walking. Near a coffee counter, she paused long enough to study the reflection in a glass display rather than turn around directly. Nobody appeared to be following her. Her phone vibrated once inside her jacket. She waited several seconds before checking it. The message contained only 3 words. Target on sight. Danielle locked the screen immediately. Across the concourse, the man in the gray coat appeared beside a row of self-service kiosks. He looked ordinary, middle-aged, carrying a leather briefcase. The kind of traveler people forgot before reaching their gate. Danielle knew better. She resumed walking toward Fast Track, keeping nearly 50 feet between them. Another member of the surveillance team was somewhere behind her. A third was monitoring cameras from a secured location. Danielle did not know exactly where each agent stood, and that was intentional. If one person was exposed, the others could continue. The gray coat reached the entrance to Fast Track. Danielle followed at a measured distance and presented the credential created for her cover. The employee at the lane scanned it. Green light. Danielle stepped forward. 20 feet ahead, the gray coat slowed. Then a voice came from her right. "Ma'am." Danielle turned. Officer Ryan Mercer was watching her. He had allowed 2 travelers ahead of her to continue without more than a glance. Now his attention had settled entirely on Danielle. "I need to see that again," he said. She handed him the same credential that had just been accepted. Mercer studied it, then studied her face longer than the document. Danielle glanced once toward Gate 12. The gray coat was still moving. The clock was still running. And before Mercer asked his second question, Danielle already understood that the most dangerous obstacle to the operation might not be the man they had spent 6 months following. Mercer held the credential beneath the fluorescent light, as though staring at it long enough might reveal the answer he had already decided he wanted. Danielle watched him without changing her expression. Every additional second mattered now. Beyond his shoulder, the man in the gray coat was approaching Gate 12, moving with the relaxed pace of someone who believed nobody in the terminal knew his name. "Where did you get this?" Mercer asked. Danielle kept her voice even. "It was issued to me." "That was not my question." "It is the answer." Mercer looked up slowly. 2 travelers passed through the neighboring lane, while another port employee waved them forward. Neither received the scrutiny Danielle was receiving. Mercer returned his attention to her document. "What is your business here?" "Travel." "Where are you going?" Danielle gave the destination listed under her cover identity. Mercer studied her again. It was not the normal glance of an officer comparing a face to identification. His eyes moved from the credential to her clothes, then back to her face, as though something about the combination refused to fit the picture he expected. Danielle had experienced that kind of judgment before. Sometimes it announced itself loudly. Sometimes it arrived disguised as procedure. The dangerous part was not always what people said. It was what they had decided before asking the first question. "Step over here," Mercer said, pointing toward an inspection area beside the lane. Danielle did not move. Not yet. She looked toward Gate 12. The gray coat had stopped near a bank of windows overlooking the harbor. A second man stood roughly 15 feet away, holding a paper coffee cup and pretending to study the departure board. Danielle recognized him from surveillance photographs. Not a confirmed suspect. Not yet, but close enough to make her pulse tighten. The meeting was beginning. "Ma'am," I said, "step aside." Mercer raised his voice just enough for nearby travelers to notice. Heads turned. Danielle calculated her choices. Showing her federal credentials would end Mercer's questions, but it could also expose the operation. Walking away from the lane could cost the team visual confirmation of the exchange. Arguing would attract even more attention. So she chose the only option her training left her. "Calm." "Officer," the credential cleared the scanner, she said. "If you believe there is a problem, Verify it through your system. Mercer gave a thin smile. You seem pretty familiar with how security works. Danielle heard suspicion in his voice where there should have been procedure. I read instructions. Or maybe you have done this before. The accusation remained deliberately unfinished. Danielle's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Imagine being forced to defend yourself while knowing the truth could end the conversation instantly, yet revealing that truth could destroy months of work. That was the trap Danielle stood inside. Mercer thought her silence meant uncertainty. In reality, she was listening to everything. The terminal announcements, the radio near his shoulder, the footsteps behind her, the faint vibration from the second phone hidden inside her jacket. One vibration. Pause. Two vibrations. The surveillance team's warning signal. Something had changed. Danielle looked past Mercer again. The man with the coffee cup was moving toward the gray coat. They were now less than 10 feet apart. Mercer noticed where she was looking and stepped directly into her line of sight. Eyes on me. For the first time, Danielle's calm expression hardened. You need to finish your verification and let me continue. Mercer returned the credential to her, but he did not step aside. Instead, he reached toward his radio. I think we are going to have a longer conversation. Behind him, the two men near Gate 12 finally crossed paths, and Danielle understood that the operation had just reached the moment she could not afford to miss. The man with the coffee cup passed the gray coat without stopping, without speaking, without even turning his head, and to anyone else watching, nothing had happened. Danielle knew better. As they crossed, the gray coat shifted his leather briefcase from his right hand to his left, while the other man slipped one hand briefly into his jacket pocket. It lasted less than 2 seconds. Danielle needed a clear view of what came next. Mercer gave her none. Move out of the lane, he ordered. Now. Danielle kept her eyes fixed beyond him. Verify my credential first. I already told you what to do. His voice carried farther this time, cutting through the ordinary noise of the terminal. Travelers slowed. A businessman near the scanner turned around. A family waiting beside the fast-track entrance fell quiet. Danielle could feel attention gathering around her, and attention was exactly what the operation could not afford. Officer Mercer, she said after reading the name on his uniform, I am asking you to follow your own verification procedure. Something changed in his expression when she used his name. Do not tell me how to do my job. Then do it. The words were calm, almost quiet, but the silence that followed made them feel louder. Mercer stepped closer and pointed toward the public concourse. You are leaving this area. Danielle remained where she was. She had spent months preparing for unpredictable suspects, compromised communications, false identities, and surveillance failures. Nobody had prepared her for an officer turning routine verification into a public confrontation at the exact moment two targets were meeting less than 40 yards away. The second phone vibrated again beneath her jacket. Once, then twice. Urgent. Danielle glanced toward Gate 12. The gray coat was moving. The man with the coffee cup remained near the windows, but something small was now visible between his fingers. A white access card. Confirmation. Danielle needed 5 more seconds. Maybe 10. Mercer followed her gaze and misunderstood everything. Who are you watching? He asked. Danielle looked back at him. Nobody. You keep looking over there. Because I am trying to catch my flight. That is not what it looks like to me. There it was again. Not evidence. Not verification. An assumption dressed as certainty. Danielle drew a slow breath. My credential passed the scanner. You have my information. There is no reason to keep me here. Mercer reached for her forearm and began guiding her away from Fast Track. Danielle did not struggle. She knew exactly what a public scene would do to the operation. But the humiliation still landed. Phones rose around them. People stared. Nobody knew her name. Yet several faces already seemed to have decided what kind of person she must be. Mercer saw a black woman being removed from a restricted lane. Danielle saw 6 months of work disappearing toward Gate 12. Keep walking, Mercer said. Danielle turned her head just enough to maintain sight of the gray coat. 20 yards. Then 25. He was getting farther away. The man with the coffee cup disappeared into the crowd. Danielle's phone vibrated again. Mercer heard it this time. Stop. He looked toward her jacket. Give me the phone. Danielle froze. That device was not registered to her cover identity. It contained no obvious federal information, but surrendering it could create questions she could not answer without exposing herself. I cannot do that. Mercer stared at her. You cannot. The nearby conversations faded. Danielle could feel dozens of eyes on them now. She had reached the edge of the concourse, farther from gate 12 than the operation allowed, and the gray coat was almost beyond sight. Mercer extended his hand. Phone. Now. Danielle looked at his open palm, then toward the disappearing target. For months, she had protected her identity by knowing exactly when not to speak. Now silence itself was becoming dangerous. She met Mercer's eyes. Officer, if you take that phone, this situation becomes much bigger than you think. Mercer smiled, convinced he had finally heard fear. Danielle knew it was a warning. Danielle did not reach for the phone. For 3 long seconds, neither of them moved. Mercer stood with his hand extended, waiting for obedience, while Danielle listened to the terminal around them as if every sound carried information. A boarding announcement echoed overhead. A luggage cart rolled across the concourse. Somewhere behind the security counters, a radio crackled. Then the phone inside Danielle's jacket vibrated again, one short pulse followed by 2. The signal confirmed what she already feared. The target was moving away from gate 12. Hand it over, Mercer said. Danielle kept her voice controlled. You have no lawful reason to take my personal property. I will decide what is relevant. That sentence told her everything she needed to know about the next few minutes. Mercer was no longer checking a credential. He was defending a conclusion. Danielle could end it. Her real federal identification was concealed inside a narrow compartment in her bag, close enough to reach in seconds. One badge, one name, one phone call. Mercer would step aside, supervisors would arrive, and every suspicious glance surrounding her would disappear. But so would her cover. The man in the gray coat had spent months avoiding federal investigators. If he saw agents converge on Danielle, he would understand immediately that the terminal was compromised. He might vanish before the surveillance team identified the person receiving the leaked information. Danielle looked past Mercer. The gray coat was gone. Are you listening to me? Mercer asked. Yes. Then give me the phone. No. The answer was quiet. Final. Mercer stared at her, as if calm refusal offended him more than anger would have. Then you are coming with me to the security office. Danielle's eyes shifted toward the fast-track lane. She could still reveal herself. She could protect her pride, correct the assumptions, and regain control of the situation. Instead, she made the harder choice. Fine. Mercer seemed almost surprised. He gestured toward a corridor beyond the public screening area. Danielle began walking. The crowd parted around them. Some travelers watched openly. Others looked away the moment Danielle met their eyes. Imagine knowing that everyone around you was witnessing only half the truth, and knowing you had to let them believe the wrong half, because something larger depended on your silence. Danielle felt the weight of that choice with every step. She was not ashamed of who she was. She was protecting why she was there. 20 yards from the security office, a ceiling camera rotated slightly. Danielle noticed. The surveillance team still had her. That mattered. Behind another wall, Special Agent in Charge Thomas Reed watched the terminal feeds with growing concern. Danielle's unexpected removal from Fast Track had already forced the team to adjust. One agent followed the gray coat toward the eastern concourse. Another remained near Gate 12, watching the man with the coffee cup. Reed studied Danielle on the monitor and understood the decision she was making. Revealing her identity now might save her from embarrassment, but it could destroy the operation. He pressed the communication control. Danielle's concealed receiver produced a whisper almost too faint to hear. Carter, maintain cover. We still have the target. She gave no visible reaction. Mercer opened the security office door and motioned her inside. Danielle entered. Her breathing remained steady. Her face remained composed. But she understood something Mercer did not. Every minute he kept her there narrowed the team's options. The operation could survive an inconvenience. It might not survive exposure. Mercer closed the door and placed a form on the desk. Now, he said, we are going to find out who you really are. Danielle looked at him across the small room, and for the first time that morning, the irony almost made her smile. He thought identity was the mystery. It was not. The real question was how long Danielle could keep him from discovering it. Mercer sat across from Danielle beneath the harsh fluorescent lights and slid the form toward her. Full name. Danielle looked at the page without touching it. The security office was barely 12 feet across, separated from the terminal by a thick glass panel covered with narrow blinds. Outside, Travelers continued toward their gates, unaware that an operation involving months of federal surveillance was changing by the second. "You already have the name on my credential," Danielle said. Mercer leaned back. "I want to hear you say it." Danielle gave him the cover name exactly as it appeared in the system. Mercer entered it into his computer, then reached for her black bag. "I need to inspect this." Danielle's eyes sharpened. "You have not established a reason to search my belongings. You entered a controlled area, and your behavior raised concerns. My credential was accepted, and yet here we are." Mercer opened the bag before Danielle could answer. Inside were ordinary things chosen precisely because they looked ordinary. A wallet, charging cable, paperback novel, travel-sized toiletries, and a slim notebook filled with harmless notes supporting her cover identity. Mercer examined each item slowly. Danielle watched the clock on the wall. 8:58. The meeting near Gate 12 should already have ended. Her hidden receiver remained silent. That worried her more than Mercer's questions. He reached deeper into the bag and removed a plain white access card with no photograph and no visible company logo. Danielle's expression changed for less than a second. Mercer saw it. "What is this?" "Put it back." "Interesting." He turned the card between his fingers. "That is the first time you have looked nervous." Danielle was not nervous about herself. The card had been prepared to access a service corridor near the cargo administration wing if the surveillance team needed to follow the target beyond the public terminal. By itself, it revealed almost nothing. But if Mercer attempted to scan it through the wrong system, someone connected to the leak might receive an access alert. "Do not scan that card," Danielle said. Mercer looked at her. "Why?" "Because you do not understand what it is connected to." His suspicion deepened. "Then explain it." Danielle remained silent. The receiver in her ear finally came alive with a faint voice. "Target is moving east. Possible compromise. Thomas Reed." Danielle's heartbeat quickened. Mercer could not hear the transmission, but he noticed her attention shift. "What are you listening to?" She said nothing. He placed the access card beside his keyboard and reached toward a reader mounted near the monitor. Danielle leaned forward. "Officer Mercer, do not do that." He paused, almost pleased by the urgency in her voice. "Now we are getting somewhere." Imagine watching months of careful work approach disaster because someone needed to prove that his first assumption had been right. Danielle could reveal everything. She could place her federal credentials on the desk and end the argument. But Reed's instruction had been clear. Maintain cover. The team still had the target. Then another message reached her receiver, sharper this time. Gray coat changed route. "He may know." Danielle looked toward the closed office door. The operation was slipping. Mercer lifted the white card toward the reader. "Last chance. Tell me what this opens." Danielle's composure remained, but the patience beneath it was gone. "I am asking you once more. Put it down." Mercer studied her face and moved the card closer. Before it reached the scanner, his radio crackled with a request from terminal security. A man matching the gray coat's description had abruptly left the passenger concourse and entered an employee-only corridor. Mercer turned toward the radio. Danielle closed her eyes for one brief second. The target had changed his behavior. Whether he had detected surveillance or simply sensed something wrong, the distinction no longer mattered. The mission was entering its most dangerous phase, and Danielle understood that protecting her cover for another minute might cost them the person they had spent 6 months trying to identify. The radio message changed everything. Mercer turned toward the sound, listening as terminal security repeated the report about an unidentified man entering an employee-only corridor east of Gate 12. Danielle watched his expression carefully. He heard an isolated security problem. She heard 6 months of federal work slipping through a closing door. Her concealed receiver came alive almost immediately. "Carter, target approaching cargo administration. We are losing visual." Thomas Reed sounded controlled, but the urgency beneath his voice was unmistakable. Danielle looked at the clock. 9 o'clock. There was no longer time to protect both the operation and her identity. Mercer set his radio down and reached again for the white access card. "Maybe this explains why you were watching that area." Danielle stood. "Do not touch the scanner." Mercer looked up. "Sit down." She remained still. "Officer Mercer, listen carefully. You need to call a number for me." His expression hardened. "You are not making demands. This is not a demand. It is the last opportunity one have to resolve this without creating a larger problem." Mercer gave a quiet laugh. "You have been saying that since I stopped you." Danielle reached slowly toward her jacket. Mercer immediately raised one hand. "Keep your hands where I can see them." She stopped. Calm. Deliberate. "There is a telephone number written on the back of the credential inside my inner pocket. You can retrieve it yourself, or you can allow me to do it." Mercer studied her for several seconds before nodding toward the pocket. Slowly, Danielle removed a narrow leather credential case and placed it closed on the desk. Mercer looked at it, but did not open it. "Call the number first," she said. "Why?" "Because once you open that case, my cover is finished." For the first time, uncertainty appeared behind Mercer's confidence. He picked up the office telephone and entered the number Danielle gave him. One ring. Two. Then someone answered. Mercer identified himself and began explaining that he had detained a woman in the terminal. He stopped halfway through the sentence. His posture changed. "Yes, sir," he said. Silence. "I understand." Another pause. "She is here." Danielle could not hear Reed's exact words, but she did not need to. Mercer slowly lowered the receiver and stared at her. "Who are you?" Danielle's hidden earpiece delivered another message. "Target at East Service Corridor. Team moving. Cover no longer viable." That was the authorization she had been waiting for. She opened the leather case and turned it toward Mercer. The federal seal caught the fluorescent light. His eyes moved from the photograph to the credentials, then back to Danielle. "Special Agent Danielle Carter," she said. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." The room became completely still. The confidence that had carried Mercer through every accusation disappeared without an argument, without a raised voice, without Danielle needing to prove anything beyond the truth he had refused to verify. A knock sounded at the door. Mercer turned. Two people in plain clothes entered, followed by a port security supervisor whose face was tight with concern. The taller federal agent stepped forward. "Agent Carter, we need you now." The target changed course. Danielle took the white access card from the desk and returned it to her bag. Mercer opened his mouth. "I did not know." Danielle looked at him. "That was the problem. You did not know, and you decided anyway." No anger sharpened her words. That made them heavier. She walked toward the door, but Reed's voice reached her through the receiver before she crossed the threshold. "Danielle, there is something else." The target did not choose that employee corridor randomly. She stopped. "What do you mean?" "Someone gave him access." Danielle looked back at the white card, then at Mercer's computer, where the terminal security network remained open. The investigation had just changed shape. Mercer believed discovering Danielle was an undercover federal agent was the worst revelation waiting inside that room. He was wrong. The real surprise was that the person they had been hunting might have help from someone already inside the port. Danielle stepped into the corridor with the two federal agents beside her, and the terminal suddenly felt different. Minutes earlier, she had been forced to protect her cover while strangers watched her with suspicion. Now every second belonged to the investigation. "Where is he?" she asked. "East Service Corridor, heading toward Cargo Administration," the taller agent replied. "Our team has visual again." Danielle moved quickly but without drawing attention. Behind them, Mercer remained inside the security office with the port supervisor, staring at the open doorway as though the entire morning had been rewritten in front of him. Danielle had no time to think about him. Not yet. Her receiver carried Reed's voice. "We checked the access log." The gray coat entered using an active employee credential. Danielle slowed. "Whose?" A pause followed. "Calvin Brooks, Cargo Compliance Supervisor." Danielle knew the name. Brooks had appeared repeatedly during the investigation, but always at the edges. Clean employment history. No unexplained financial activity. No obvious connection to the leaked inspection schedules. He had been background noise. Now he was suddenly at the center. "Where is Brooks?" Danielle asked. According to his schedule, he should be in an administrative meeting on the 3rd floor. Should be. He never arrived. Danielle looked toward the glass wall overlooking the harbor. Outside, cranes moved containers beneath the pale morning sky while trucks traveled along marked lanes hundreds of feet below. 6 months of scattered evidence were beginning to align. The altered schedules, the unexplained fast-track access, the cargo inspections that somehow missed exactly the shipments someone wanted missed. The gray coat had not entered the employee corridor because he panicked. He had entered because someone had prepared the route for him. "Do not close the exits yet," Danielle said. "If Brooks is involved, I want to know where he goes." Reed answered immediately. Agreed. That was the difference Mercer had never understood. Authority was not the power to act first. Sometimes it was the discipline to wait until the facts gave you the right action. Danielle reached a security station where an agent had pulled up camera feeds from the eastern corridor. On one screen, the gray coat appeared near a service elevator. On another, Calvin Brooks emerged from a stairwell approximately 60 feet away. No dramatic greeting. No obvious signal. Brooks simply placed a document envelope on a maintenance card and continued walking. Seconds later, the gray coat passed the card and picked it up. Danielle watched without blinking. "There," she said. The room went quiet. The exchange they had waited 6 months to confirm had finally happened, captured from 2 camera angles. Reed's voice came through the receiver. "We have enough. Teams are moving." Danielle exhaled slowly. The operation had survived. Barely. Within minutes, federal personnel secured the relevant areas and separated the individuals for questioning without disrupting the wider terminal. No spectacle. No chaos. Just procedure, evidence, and carefully documented decisions. Danielle turned back toward the security office. Mercer was standing outside now with his supervisor. His earlier certainty was gone. "Agent Carter," he began, "I owe you an explanation." Danielle stopped several feet away. "What I need from you is not an explanation." Mercer looked confused. "Then what?" "Your incident reports." She held his gaze. "All of them." The port supervisor turned toward him. Danielle continued. "Today was not dangerous because you failed to recognize an agent. It was dangerous because you made assumptions before you verified facts. If that happened to me, I need to know who else it happened to." Mercer said nothing. Danielle did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply walked past him as federal investigators began requesting his previous detention records. The badge in her pocket had revealed who she was. The records were about to reveal who he had been. By late afternoon, Harbor International Terminal had returned to its ordinary rhythm. Departure announcements rolled across the concourse. Travelers hurried toward gates with coffee cups and carry-on bags. Outside the tall windows, cargo cranes continued their slow movement above the water as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside a secured federal office 2 floors above the passenger terminal, the morning had already begun producing consequences. Calvin Brooks and the man in the gray coat were being questioned separately. The envelope recovered during the operation contained information investigators had spent months trying to trace, including restricted cargo inspection schedules that should never have left authorized systems. The evidence would have to be reviewed carefully, documented properly, and tested through the legal process. Danielle wanted it that way. Justice built on shortcuts was only another form of arrogance. Across the building, Ryan Mercer had been removed from active terminal duties while supervisors opened an administrative review. Danielle's request for his previous incident reports had uncovered a pattern that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Complaints. Repeated secondary screenings. Travelers questioned after valid credentials had already cleared. Several reports involving black passengers whose ordinary behavior had somehow been described as suspicious. None of those records alone proved everything. Together, they demanded questions that should have been asked much earlier. Danielle stood near the fast-track entrance again shortly before sunset. The same scanner glowed beside the lane. The same polished floor reflected the overhead lights. 40 yards away, Gate 12 looked almost painfully ordinary. She remembered standing there that morning, watching a 6-month operation begin to unravel while strangers watched her as if she were the problem. One badge could have changed their faces instantly. That thought stayed with her. Not because she wished she had revealed herself sooner, but because most people treated that way did not have a federal credential hidden inside a jacket. They did not have Thomas Reed waiting on a secure telephone line. They did not have a surveillance team capable of confirming the truth. They simply had their word, and their dignity should have been enough. Mercer approached from the far side of the concourse accompanied by his supervisor. He stopped several feet from Danielle. For once, there was no command in his voice. "Agent Carter." Danielle turned. Mercer hesitated. "I kept thinking about what you said. About deciding before knowing." She waited. "I thought I was protecting the terminal," he continued. "But I was looking for reasons to prove myself right." Danielle studied him quietly. "A uniform gives you responsibility," she said. "It does not make your assumptions true." Mercer lowered his eyes. There was no dramatic forgiveness waiting for him, and Danielle did not offer one. Accountability was not humiliation. It was the opportunity to face what your choices had revealed and decide what kind of person you would become afterward. Danielle turned toward Fast Track. The employee at the entrance recognized her and stepped aside, but Danielle still presented her credential. The scanner flashed green. She walked through without slowing. No applause followed her. No crowd gathered. She did not need either. Her victory was not that Mercer finally understood she was important. Her victory was refusing to accept the idea that respect should depend on importance in the first place. That morning, Mercer had looked at Danielle's skin before he looked at the facts. By sunset, the facts had forced everyone to look at him. He had believed authority meant deciding who belonged. Danielle knew authority meant something harder, having the power to judge and choosing instead to verify. He had dragged her away because he thought she did not belong. By the end of the day, the badge he trusted most was the one investigating his choices.